The future is
The
vegan.
future is vegan.
The 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 future is vegan.
Hi everyone, it's Jessica, and in today's episode, well, your favorite vegan, and we'll be discussing how I overcame my fear of public speaking. So I'm going to be talking about something vulnerable to me, something I used to struggle with, and sometimes I still continue to struggle with, and it's a cycle of improving, getting better, and growing. And I want to talk a little bit about my experiences, understanding the universality of these emotions. It's something that we all go through. And some of the dangers that I found that contributed to these feelings of hyper nervousness, like over preparing or, understanding, coming in with a mindset of perfection when that's something really hard to achieve and unrealistic. So let's get into it. So first, I wanted to talk about the universality of these emotions. I know how it is, honestly, getting up on the stage, talking about something scary or in front of hundreds of people. I've been there, trust me. It's really scary. You get this sort of palpitation in your heart and, it's very hard to logically flow out your sentences. Either they come out sporadically in a sense or almost in little fractions like of a sentence. So it really varies between person to person, but it's overcome by these same emotions of nervousness, excitement, but in the wrong way, and a little bit of everything. So I used to struggle with public speaking up until now, I guess, but it's a constant cycle that I'm trying to improve. And here are some tips that really help me propel to the state that I am, where I'm able to talk freely, understand others, and communicate in a meaningful way. So you really don't want to, when you're going into public speaking, to kind of let the nervousness compound into almost insurmountable pillars that your consciousness kind of can't get past. So you really want to make sure that you're setting up the expectations for yourself on the table. Don't set your expectations too low for yourself, but you want to be realistic. Being realistic and kind of modest with yourself is really what you want to go into for a speech or whatnot. And you want to let the feeling that you're almost like the nervousness, the excitement from standing on the podium or sitting at the corner of the desk or, wherever you may be. You want to channel that in a meaningful way. So I like to use a sports analogy because that really helps me out and it helped me reframe my mindset. Essentially, when you're going on the starting line, for example, in a race, I love using racing examples because I ran cross country. But when you're standing on the line of a race, you feel nervous and you're waiting for the gun to shoot and you get these severe palpitations in your heart. But in actuality, if you channel that nervousness right when the gun shoots into excitement or into a ferocity to perform well, then that is how you're going to get the score or the time that you may want. And that's how I like to take public speaking. You approach the situation with an open mind and you get ready for anything. So I had a huge experience with public speaking in a negative way. From my early childhood and today, I struggle a little bit with lisps. You probably could tell there with my S's and my Z's, but I don't let that take the power away from my voice. So these little speech impediments really hindered my ability in middle school and early high school to express myself without feeling a little bit nervous or that my voice wasn't as valuable to others because I had some form of impediment, like my voice, my value was impeded. So that's something that really took a hit against my character and my self-esteem. And I think it's good to build it back up because regardless of something I may have, does not define me, like my lisp. It doesn't define the words that I speak, the meaningful content that I may spew or whatnot. And they're just a part of me that I cannot control. They're like little flares, unique flares that make me who I am and make my voice all the more powerful. So I think it's important to find value in your words, understanding that people who may be following you, who may be sitting in a crowd watching you, or sitting at the corner of a table ready to listen to your opinion, they're waiting there, and whether they subscribed, whether they're sitting in that chair, whether they're not talking, and they're looking at you, they want and they value your voice. You need to keep that same consistency with yourself. You need to understand that your voice holds power. Your voice is important, and people want to hear that. And keeping yourself on a morally degrading manner, I guess, is really detrimental to ourselves and to our audiences and the message that we're trying to bring across. So it's important to take breaks, do whatever you need to perform to the best of your abilities. And that's different for each of us. And next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the dangers of over-preparing. I used to be notorious for this. Whether it was preparing for my first podcast, you could probably see this on my first episode. I had somewhere near like an 8 to 9 page outline, almost like an essay, longer than a typical essay outline, because I was so nervous about staying on topic or veering off. And I think it's really funny, honestly, but it shows the dangers of anxiety and finding an unhealthy release. So there's a coping mechanism that you can use. For example, for anxiety, this unhealthy coping mechanism channels those feelings into alleviating them, essentially. So getting rid of all of them by planning everything you're going to say so you won't trip on your words. That's another form or another expression of anxiety that I struggled with, and I know a lot of other people do. Over preparation can really take a toll or a damage against your words. And it's important to, like, for instance, I'm really proud of my growth throughout this step, over preparing. I used to have these huge things, and I just have a single paper with little bullet points, and that's growth. But that's something I used to struggle with, and I know a lot of people do. So that may affirm some of these feelings, help you feel validated, or help you in whichever way. So make sure you channel them in a meaningful way, whether your anxiety is expressed through exercise to some relative extent, through writing, through drawing. I love drawing. There was I used to use adult coloring books, and I'm starting to get into them again. And that's a healthy coping mechanism for some of the anxious feelings that I may have felt about public speaking. So that's something great. And find something that works for you. So it's all about finding growth within yourself. And next, it's okay to mess up, honestly. We're human. I mess up all the time, but I still continue going. And I think that makes all the more of a difference. So when you continue going despite tripping up on a word, or despite speaking before you think, or when there's a loss of connection between your brain and your spew of thought, then you can really find a sense of imperfection, honestly. And that imperfection is really what makes your podcast all the more better, in my opinion. I never listened to scripted podcasts. That's nothing I do. It's like a movie, honestly. But I prefer to listen to somebody that's human and understanding. I love listening to podcasts by teens where they talk about the struggles, and sometimes their pronunciations are not up to date with the right words, but that's okay, and that just makes it all the more of my niche, I guess, the type of audience that I want to hear, people my age, understanding. So just remember that it's okay to mess up, and if you need to take a second to regroup, step back in, that's totally okay, and it's absolutely normal. And you may be wondering, how did I overcome these feelings? And there's about 3 or 4 kind of ways that I did that. And that's through patience, gratitude for myself and for the words that I was speaking, and assurance in my identity. So, what is assurance in your identity? Assurance in your identity is understanding and valuing your character above all else. Not in a narcissistic way where you're thinking that your moral value is superior to others, but rather in a assuring that your feelings are valid. Your identity is who you are, and you want to make sure that your identity is a measure of who you are instead of essentially living somebody else's life or following in the path of somebody else. You want to find the bravery to truly speak about the issues and find confidence in your own identity. That's something really hard to find and to be sure about. If you're following in the goals of other people, or if you're not sure where you want to be, that's a lot better than assuming something that you're not. You want to be somebody that you may have always wanted to be. And how I like to word it is that before I take an action, a meaningful course of way, essentially, I like to think, if I were my 8th grade self or my younger self, would I have been proud of the decision that I made? Would it reflect somebody that I was at the time? Of course, there's some course of growth over that journey, but would I have become someone that I may have otherwise looked up to or wanted to become? And that's how I make my decisions, honestly. So also with the gratitude instance, it's important to find assurance in your identity and staying true to yourself. I like to use self-affirmations because it's almost like a sense of gratitude to my everyday life and kind of giving myself a little bit of peace of mind. So what are some affirmations that I use? I like to say I am bold, strong, and my voice should absolutely be listened to. So that's a small affirmation. It's not super wordy. It's not complex, witty. It's simple and it gets the point across. And I think that's the most meaningful line you could have. Something not wordy and to the point. So that's what I try to get. And next, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about other people's opinions again. So don't let other people's moments of stagnance or these feelings overcoming them stop you from your growth. So that may be hard to unpack. Jessica, what do you mean? So stagnance is essentially when you're not moving. You don't want to become better and you want to stay who you are. And there is comfort to stagnance. There is almost like going home, essentially. It's the familial value, the feeling that you may feel. And when other people are trying to stay in this mindset or essentially living in this constant comfort zone, they try to hold other people back too. They try to think other people should be confined by something that they're insecure about. Not necessarily insecure, but they're scared to take the challenge or think about seeking growth. So you want to make sure that you're not held down by any value that you, or any entity essentially, that is holding you back from growth. You want to make sure that you're free of restraint, and you want to surround yourself with people that make you happy, excited, and closer to you. So make sure to seek growth. And when you're in a moment of stagnance, you're not sure what to do, try something new. And you never know, you might find a passion or whatnot. If I never started on the day of the 5K race, when I decided to go vegan, after witnessing the very graphic t-shirts of the turkeys, I may have never made that change and outwardly saw the growth that has made me into the person I am today. It was scary transitioning to an all-vegan lifestyle and even to a low-waste lifestyle, which was pretty recent. I'm still making some changes, but I'm getting my way. I'm seeking the growth. But if I never outwardly looked for that growth in my vegan journey, it was hard, but it may have never been as rewarding as it is today. So that's something to keep in mind, that the growth, as much as it may seem challenging, discomforting, will always reap you an even better result than a moment of stagnance could ever do. So next, I want to talk about my first podcast episode. I know it was only a couple months ago, but I've noticed within myself that I've changed a lot in the way that I speak publicly and express my identity. From the time that I first started my podcast, I would establish my own nonprofit organization which hit 800 followers today, which is so awesome. But yeah, so it's been really awesome getting to meet so many people that share the same values as me and interconnecting two major areas of my life. For instance, with my blog, jessicatalksveganism.com, and my podcast, I've learned a big passion of mine for dietetics, for nutrition, and combining the neuroscience aspect of things, the cognitive, behavioral, or computational aspects of neuroscience together, I found an intersection of a career that makes me excited and exhilarated. There's a high demand, but very little opportunity for this position, but they're neuroscience dietitians, and they help patients that may be struggling with neurological conditions like dementia, whatnot, and Alzheimer's disease, help them really overcome or kind of mitigate some of their symptoms in everyday life through dietary patterns. And after taking a college class about this, exploring the intersection between the two, I realized that this is something that I absolutely want to pursue for the future. And if I never really took the leap to make my first podcast talking about something, it was my first real time coming out of my comfort zone. My first podcast, to be completely honest. Writing has come natural to me in a way that's a really reassuring, and it's almost like if you say something that you may not inherently mean, you could go back and fix it. You can edit it so it's perfect. But when you're speaking and you record a podcast, it's very hard, and it's very indirect, not really inhumane, but it's indirect, it's insincere if it's completely perfect. And demonstrating and finding that connection between imperfection and perfection, between writing and podcasting, I guess, this connection has really strengthened my character. So coming out of a mindset of stagnance for me, which was writing and using that as a primary form of activism, coming into podcasting, although it was difficult, I remember the first time I came into the studio, I was nervous. I took a lot of pictures. It was exciting, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and more importantly, I didn't understand the aspect of imperfectionism that came with podcasting. And it doesn't require a million hours of preparation. It just requires a microphone and sitting beside it with an opinion, which really ignites you. Or as I like to say, sets you afire. In this episode, I wanted to talk about vulnerability, especially with my identity, my stuttering issue, and not an issue. It's something that's a part of me and a part of my identity. I've pretty much accepted it, and I think it's a unique aspect of myself. And expression, gratitude, all of these have helped make me into the person I am. And I could never express these elements of myself on paper. I never could. Not nearly to the degree that I can by speaking and using my voice. There's a power to using our voice versus anything we could ever write. So, as I conclude talking with you guys today, I would like to remind you to find your growth over your stagnance, and in periods that may feel overwhelming, underwhelming, or whatnot, to continue fighting and finding what may work for you. In a setting that may otherwise feel daunting, coming in front of the room, presenting something important, remember that other people value your voice nearly as much as you value your own, or maybe even more than you value your own. But continue overcoming your fear and taking it step by step. And eventually, as the comparison between my first podcast and now, you'll find your growth. So to that, have a great day.